And welcome to the Striped Onion Show, where we peel them back good. And now to our host, the man with the plan, Sergeant Peel.
Welcome back, friends and family. I am excited for today's show. We've got a great guest today. Today's SOS call is the Eric Skidmore from the South Carolina Law Enforcement Assistance Program. Now, I described him as the in the beginning, but it's actually a lot better than that. It is the Dr. Reverend Eric Skidmore. You know, a lot of people, you think we'd call him Doc or something like that, but no, this guy's as down to earth as it gets. He signs everything with the letter E. His emails, his text, letter E. That's how we know him, it's E. I'll tell you that right now, that I'm probably going to give him some crap about it in the show today, so just be ready for that. Side note. Anyway, before we get into the SOS call, I'm going to tell you right now, I need y'all to do me a favor. Share today's SOS call on your social media platforms, and then make sure to comment after the show. Don't matter what you're listening to, we'll respond to you. We want to know what you want to hear. We want to better this show so that we can reach our first responder friends and family. Also, take a minute to check out our website, thesosshow.com, and sign up for the email notifications for future shows and events. So without hesitation, without further ado, I'm going to go straight to our SOS call with Eric.
Hey, Dr. Skidmore, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, Sarge. Thank you for having me.
Well, I am so happy to have you on the show. I'm going to tell you, I don't even want to say warned, because I warned our listeners in my intro about having some people that are outside the first responder community. I called them the unfiltered, or maybe the people without filters. I can't remember how I said it, but I also said I had some really good people in there too, not to talk bad about them, but some really good people like yourself, people of faith, people of ministry, preachers, ministers, you name it. One of the first ones I obviously wanted to get on one of my first shows, of course, wanted to be you. So I am very appreciative and thankful for what you do, and I'm appreciative that you're agreeing to be on the show today. So thank you for being here. To my listeners, I'll tell you this. If you've heard the name Dr. Eric Skidmore or the Reverend Eric Skidmore, a lot of us know him as E, because that's how he signs text and how he signs emails, is just E. But Dr. Skidmore is probably one of the most loved non-first responder people inside the first responder community. That's the best way I can describe it. He's been in the ministry field for, I couldn't even tell you how many years. We're going on 3 decades now. Is that right, E?
That's right, 30 years, ordained in 1990, right after seminary.
There you go. So 30 years. Wow. It probably feels like yesterday it just started.
That's right.
Well, I'm going to tell you, it feels like just yesterday that I got to meet you, and that was in the mid-2000s-ish. And it was pretty unique how I met you. But one of the things I'll say is I have never met a more kind and gentle person with such a huge passion for helping people other than you. So I'll tell you thank you from the bottom of my heart for that.
Well, thank you so much.
Well, there's a lot of people that feel that way about you, and I know I'm speaking for a lot. So if you will, just take a quick minute and just tell our SOS friends how you are involved in the first responder world, because like I said, you're a preacher, so preach. Tell me.
Right. I'll tell them. So, Sarge, I was serving in a congregation in Columbia, South Carolina, started in 1990. I was recruited to be a volunteer chaplain with the state police in 1993 after a pretty tough incident down in Horry County in the area around Nichols and Longs, and it involved the injury of several officers, a helicopter getting shot, and a sniper ending up taking the life of the bad guy. But the wounding of the officers was particularly tough, as well as, of course, the officer-involved shooting where the sniper took his life. But the chief of SLED, the chief of the State Law Enforcement Division, was worshiping at that church where I was serving, and he walked out the door shortly after that incident and said, "Hey, would you consider being a volunteer chaplain with the State Law Enforcement Division?" And I think without even knowing what the job description was, I said, "That'd be fine. I'd love to be of assistance if I can." So that was sort of the start of it. So more than, let's see, I'm in my 24th year doing this, so that was about 27 years ago. And in 1996 was part of a crew that wrote a federal grant application under the Victims of Crime Act, and it was just a dream, really, just something we were hoping for, but didn't know if it would come to pass. And lo and behold, the grant was granted, and it provided funds to open up the office, which became eventually the South Carolina Law Enforcement Assistance Program. And that was how we got started, 1997 to the present.
Wow, that's 97. So that'll put me at about the 10-year mark before I even got involved, and it was very well established when I got involved in it. So, you know, for 10 years, and I know of some of the ones that were in from the beginning, and I still know them. And we talked about one. We talked about several of them last show. My last show, and I'll tell you, was the newest retired captain from the Georgia State Patrol, Mr. Andy Carrier.
Right.
Andy talked about a few of those people. Joe Nell down from the PD that you're talking about with that incident that got you involved. But, you know, other LEAP organizations in other states, people like Aaron Back and stuff like that. So talking about the people in Texas a little bit.
Yeah. And they, you know, it's interesting, if it's any measure of the how much police officers love to help other police officers. There are some guys who were in the original training class with the peer support team, and I know that's how we came to be connected with each other after your first critical incident that I knew you from. And those guys are still involved. So 23 and a half years later, they are still helping other police officers. I had a North Carolina trooper tell me one time, he said, "You know, I did a lot of cool stuff over the years with the North Carolina Patrol, from defensive tactics to teaching in the academy to all the wonderful things they let me do. But," he said, "the best thing I ever did was helping other police officers through our peer support team."
I think I would personally have to agree with that statement too. I've done some really awesome stuff. I've been on some, I'd say, crazy, but at the same token, awesome missions, investigations, call-outs, calls, both on the police fire side. And I'm going to tell you, I don't think I get any more enjoyment than I do when I'm actually going somewhere and helping other officers. I agree, or other firefighters. So, yeah, I'd have to agree with that statement of that North Carolina guy. And I got an idea who you're talking about, but I'm not going to guess on the show. But we probably talked about him last week, too. He might be a retired guy, I believe.
Very well have. He's now retired, and we stay in touch with him. But there was not anything he liked more about being a police officer than helping other police officers.
Absolutely.
That was his calling and his passion.
Absolutely. And that's pretty much how I feel about it too. So, well, good. So tell me about what SC LEAP really does. What is SC LEAP? We call it SC LEAP. That's the South Carolina Law Enforcement Assistance Program that he talked about. What is SC LEAP?
Sure. So, Sarge, I hope folks will either go to our website and or download the app that we've just created. It's just SC LEAP on the Apple App Store or Google Play. Just search SCLEAP, and there's an overview there. But put simply, SC LEAP started, this is how I got involved in it, it started as a chaplaincy program only. But then as 1997 turned to 98 and on towards the end of the grant funding period and partnership with other state agencies, it became much more than a chaplaincy program. It morphed into a program that was well, it's very much a hybrid. In some ways, it is an internal EAP program for law enforcement in the state, but it was it often talk about it in terms of the hub of a wheel with a lot of spokes going out. One of the main spokes is chaplaincy, of course, but then 2 or 3 or 4 spokes are peer support, where we're going out into the field, as we did yesterday with a local department here in South Carolina that suffered the death of an officer in a collision on Friday, and our peer support team was there yesterday to do what's called a crisis management briefing. So that's an example of the peer support work that's going on in our state really every week. Every week we've got peer team members, mental health professionals, chaplains out working with state and local police officers. One of the things that morphed out of that process was the need for a formal way to follow up with officers. So we adapted, we borrowed a model that the FBI created in 1983 called a post-critical incident seminar. Your listeners may know all about that already. But it is our formal way to follow up with officers who've been through horrific events on the job and may be feeling stuck in some way. So we provide the PCIS, the Post-Critical Incident Seminar, 4 times a year here in South Carolina. And, of course, Sarge, you're a part of the team that provides those seminars, and it's now expanded to 9 other states. We also have a similar type program based on the same platform, using those same skills around the area of traumatic grief. So that's the traumatic loss seminar. We also have one focused on soldiers and soldier cops who've been deployed to the war zone, called a post-deployment seminar, or also a COMPASS program. So it's the chaplaincy, it's the peer support, it's the seminar program, and then there's a whole range of additional services SC LEAP has developed over those last 23 and a half years, everything from addiction services to post-deployment referrals to a whole cadre of mental health professionals, all trained in eye movement, desensitization, and reprocessing. We're constantly working on ways to provide help to police officers and staff and their families that really is help. So I'll stop there.
No. I'll tell you this. I'm gonna go. It kind of brought up an idea or a conversation that me and Andy Carrier had last week.
Right.
I said basically, yeah, that Skidmore guy is the only preacher I know that's committed a crime of theft from the FBI and was never charged. He kind of agreed, and he talked about something else, and I said, I'm going to have to add to it right now. I don't realize how much he may have stole it, but how much he was praised for it, because it wasn't a stealing per se, as it was a repurposing, and it grows every time we turn around. We might modify one piece of it here and there, but the PCIS, has done so much for not just individuals, but marriages, families, and whole departments sometimes. We've had major turnaround at that kind of event. So it's not just here that's happened. I know you've been to more states than I have. I've been to 4 different states to PCISs. And even though there might be little changes here and there in how those states run those PCISs, they all have the same results in the end. And it is crazy how life-changing those are. So.
Well, thank you. It's
you started it, so I'm pointing my finger and.
It's a team effort, and we never could pull it off in any of those states if we weren't doing it as a team. I think of so many wonderful peer support team members, mental health professionals who have really come to the table. And I was telling someone about it last week. I said, what's interesting about this is the number of folks who were on the South Carolina team who they wouldn't miss one if they didn't have to. They gained so much energy and such a warm feeling of support for one another, for help on their own stuckness, if you will, that all of our peer team members love to come, and I wish we could do 12 a year. And that would mean we would be able to include many more peer team members on a regular basis. There are other states that are in the offing. I'm hoping and praying, as a chaplain might do, that Connecticut might join us very soon, that Louisiana may join us, that Florida may join us, that West Virginia may join us. All 4 of those states have come and expressed to me personally their interest in bringing this program to their state.
That's awesome, because I'm going to tell you, it's the states that we've already partnered with, and we've all seen it. That's the ones that are on the inside. I mean, when we get an email saying, hey, we need to borrow so many people to go to this state so we can get this from Crunk Up, or, hey, we need to, Texas needs to borrow 3 this time because of this, that, or the other. And most of the time it's without question. It's like, yeah, no problem. We'll figure it out. And then, we end up sending what they need. The partnerships and the relationships across the United States with this, because it's quickly spread to the Midwest, to our southern states, all over the Southeast. It's up in the New England area. So, yeah, as well as I do, as time goes forward, you're going to keep seeing this thing move on out to the West Coast. So,
well, I hope and pray that that's the case, because by the time we all retire, I hope many, many states have their own PCIS program. And, like Alcoholics Anonymous, there's the 12 steps, but also there's something called the 12 traditions that are paired with those 12 steps. And in the PCIS program, we have traditions. And one of those traditions is that we help each other. Nobody's really no organization is traveling around and hosting PCISs in different states. Part of the tradition is that we help each other, and our dream is that Louisiana and Florida and West Virginia and Connecticut, they have their own PCIS. And it's very much an interagency program in each state. So the tradition of helping each other, of showing each other the way, and loaning our peers to those states who need particular kinds of peers. Maybe they need guys who were involved in a chase that was a fatality at the end of it, or they need some SWAT guys, or they need aviators, or they need canine folks. But now we've got 10 states with those kind of resources to share with each other and with other states.
Yeah, that's one thing we talk about that's kind of interesting. You pretty much could figure out within a matter of minutes if we needed to hook up a specific type peer with a specific type person involved in an incident. Whether it's a left-handed short guy, you could probably stop for about 3 minutes and figure out, all right, my shortest left-handed guy is this person. I'm going to call them and hook them up. That's just how you are. I mean, that's the network that you've created, and our SOS followers need to understand how serious this is. This is such an awesome resource to our first responders, and that's the one thing that we keep spreading this stuff over to, is into the fire and EMS side, because yes, SC LEAP is a law enforcement assistance program, but it doesn't really kind of close off just the law enforcement, because several PCISs, we've seen people outside of law enforcement there because they were involved in an incident with law enforcement.
Right.
I know Georgia, they've had strictly firefighters involved in some of their PCIS events, and Texas had one same way. So that's pretty unique that it's not closed-minded to law enforcement. It is open to first responders. It's just kind of tight right now and and I know we're still trying. I know the pandemic kind of slowed us down on us creating a fire and EMS only PCIS. And I hope that'll kick back up once things get into some kind of level of normalcy, if you will. So
Yes, that's certainly the plan. The South Carolina Firefighters Association and the associated FAST team members, EMS, fire, dispatch, the folks who are on what is called the FAST team, they are making plans to bring online, as you say, PCIS focused on their population, and we're going to help them launch that, and then they will take it over, and it will be theirs. They'll run with it.
Just like South Carolina Department of Corrections,
Mm-hmm.
they did a corrections-based PCIS. I mean,
Yeah.
that's awesome. Have they done two now?
I think
they did one before the pandemic.
I think they've done more than that. And
Okay.
I've got their schedule, and had not been for the pandemic, they would have been doing them right along. But Karen Ho, who is the coordinator of their program,
Wonderful lady,
is a wonderful lady. And one of the things that's so important on the law enforcement side with regard to this topic is Karen, every time they do one now, they invite the administrators of detention centers all across our state to send their detention officers to join the correction officers, and that is a true gift right there.
Oh yeah, because that's a different world.
Yeah.
And I'd be the first to say I could go to those PCISs. I could probably help them up to a certain point, but I'm not corrections. You know,
Right.
I respect them, but I've never done their job. So they're going to give some trust in me, but they're not going to give that full 100% trust because I didn't walk through the same walls they have.
Right.
So I that's an awesome thing. Just that's one thing I was stoked about, was that growing, and then getting notified that Fire and EMS was right behind it. They're trying. So it's not trying. It's going to happen. I think pandemic's the biggest thing that screwed that up, but it's just a speed bump, I'd like to say. It's going to happen, guys. So I'm looking forward to that. We'll put it that way.
It's coming, and I think we'll be asking for help in South Carolina from the North Carolina Fire EMS and the Georgia Fire EMS folks who are familiar with PCIS already. They'll be part.
There's several in the Augusta area. I do know that. So.
Yes, yeah. So some of those peers will be right there on the front lines in that first team of PCIS folks.
That's awesome. Looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to these other states to crank them up. It's time to start flowing, especially right now. It seems like our first responders have been hit more emotionally and mentally over the last few months, in addition to the pandemic, than your average day of a first responder. So do know that there's programs out there, guys. You know, there's SC Leap is I'd like to say the forefront of this whole thing, but Eric will never say that. He'll just say that we're one big team, and it's true. But I'm super proud to be a part of what Eric has created, and like I said, it's spreading like wildfire across the nation. So it's going to be awesome.
You know, Sarge, it was interesting. The National Sheriff's Association, in partnership with the Justice Clearinghouse, which is an educational organization, invited us to come on recently, and we did two pieces on the PCIS. One was kind of an overview of the program, and then about 20 minutes about the research related to PCIS that is being carried out by Dr. Joe Chang, MD, PhD, associated with the Medical University of South Carolina. He's one of our partners. And
he's also another good guy and good resource. I love seeing him around the PCIS. Didn't mean to interrupt you, but keep going. I just want to shout out Dr. Chang.
Okay. The second part B of that program was the Texas administrator over the PCIS, the Kentucky administrator, and a third one. I'm trying to remember. Andy Carrier was going to be on the program, and he got called away for an emergency. Kit Cummings with the Virginia program. So I'll just say that both of those clips from Justice Clearinghouse are on the brand new app under the PCIS button. So take a look at it.
Oh, wow. Cool. Yeah, I started looking through that app. It just came out last week, am I right?
That's right. It took a number of months, 7 or 8 months, to get it to that point with all the design and creation, and then a review by the security folks just to be sure we were on track. But it is now available to the world under the Apple Store and under Google Play.
It's got some good resources in there, guys. Y'all might want to look at it. And otherwise, you know, the websites are still great. SELeap.org. It's got some good information on there, videos. Gives you some insight on what the PDSs, the PCISs, and the STLSs are about. One thing I do want to talk about, I want to talk about basically the simplicity of peer support at this point. So I know we had the incident in the upstate where we had an officer killed in a car wreck. You talked about it a few minutes ago. There's actually a pretty unique process with helping not just departments, but multi-agency departments that go through stuff like this. And not using just that one as an example. If you got some other ones you want to, but say something very traumatic, like unexpected like that happens, what's some resources that you can spread to our SOS followers for services that are available?
Sure. So peer support, we discovered that when we got started, that the officers that we were dealing with in relationship to critical incidents in particular, they would listen to people like me, who my training and background is a clergy person, and they'd listen to the mental health professionals, but it was in no way comparable to how they would listen to other police officers. And we said, you know, if we're going to get traction with this group, we've got to have a very robust peer support program. So we began right away. Our first training was with Dr. Roger Solomon, who was the clinical director of 29 of our first 29 PCISs. Andy Grueller is the clinical director now in South Carolina. But Dr. Solomon trained us, and then Andy Grueller and I went and got some training. We went to the Train the Trainer program and are able to provide peer support training in South Carolina very, very inexpensively. And as a matter of fact, in the next 2 or 3 months, I'll be training with you guys down in North Augusta. I'll be training with the Greenville Sheriff's Office and the Anderson Sheriff's Office, and not just me, but Andy Grueller and other members of our training staff, Dave Tafawa, Joe Nell, Guy Van Horn, Melissa Durando in North Carolina. So we're going to be hosting some training. But really, right there, what you're talking about, I think if there's if there's a measurement, I'm not sure what the measurement size is, but if you're looking at the secret sauce of what makes SCLEAP work and makes these other programs work around the country, you cannot underestimate the use of peer support in what we do. Police officers are skeptical by nature. When you sat down in Henderson County, North Carolina last week, following a felonious assault on an officer was murdered up there. It was immediately clear when the officers who were impacted by that critical incident came into the room. There was a mental health professional in the room with you, but that person was not leading the process. They were there as a resource. It was the other 5 police officers who were peer support personnel who were there to lead them through what might be a psychoeducational process or psychological first aid, perhaps. These are descriptors of peer support in some ways, but the officers themselves will say to us, and again, more than 20 years now, they've said, what you brought to us in our time of crisis, in the days right after our friend was killed, or right after we had to go to that wreck where those little children were killed, or whatever horrific event it is, they will say it was really helpful to hear from people who we were clear got it. They understood what we do because they do what we do back in their home agency. So the secret sauce very much of the peer support of the SC LEAP and of the PCIS is that peer support element.
Yeah, I would agree. The biggest thing I'm going to add to it that I've learned through the years, building on what you just said, is it is not just for one person, though. The biggest thing that I've learned, Eric, correct me if I'm wrong, the biggest thing that I've learned is when you've got one person obviously affected by it, that means you have at least a handful more who aren't showing it but are also affected. So it could be department-wide. The resources that are available, building on what he said, is very specific to we've got stuff in place to help large quantities of people inside these first responder communities. So.
Yes, absolutely. And, I heard one of our lead peer team members yesterday when we were in Anderson, South Carolina. He was making a little presentation to the officers impacted by the death of this officer in a collision. And he was talking about the impact of a critical incident, not only on the officer, but on their family. And he said, like he always says in PCIS, he said, if it happened to you, it happened to those that love you.
Absolutely.
And we need to provide peer support not only to the officers and the staff of the department who are so impacted by the injury or the death of an officer, to the home front where spouses, significant others, partners live that need the care and support of the peer support program as well.
Well, one thing I've noticed that you've done well with, and it's very surprising on how well it is. We've had, we've talked about felonious assaults and murders on police officers and stuff like that, or just traumatic calls. Like I said, whole departments. You've got stuff prepared in such a way that you can react based on the request and needs of the department that sends it to you, where you could set stuff up for even spouses to have some level of, like you said, kind of like a psychological first aid, a crisis management briefing, to address some of the spouses and significant others' needs too. We've seen that numerous times. I've been on several deployments with you numerous times. Those things have been very, very beneficial as well. So
yeah,
kudos on doing stuff like that.
I'm thinking about Sarge, I'm thinking about when here in our state, in Aiken County, we had the murder of two police officers less than 40 days apart in the same department. And working with that department, we not only provided services to the sworn officers, but at the request of the director, we provide services to the non-sworn personnel and also to the spouses and significant others that we didn't want to leave them out. When in York County, very recently, we had the murder of Mike Doty, who was a SWAT officer, and Kevin Tolson, who is the sheriff, said, we're not only going to do something for these officers that are impacted by this, but we want to bring the spouses and significant others together. And I remember watching the sheriff talk for more than an hour and a half and do a presentation on the facts, but also questions and answers from those spouses and significant others who are so concerned, and rightfully so, about their officers and their wellness and their mental health.
And the goal with most of these deployments, and this is one of the things we highlight on when we introduce it, is to reduce the long-range impacts of these things. So that right there is just another way that I can promise you the sheriff up there was going through a lot, just like the police chief here went through a lot. And believe it or not, inside those 40 days, they had a transfer of power. You had one chief retiring, another chief coming in, and their transition happened in between these two officers' murders. So you actually had two police chiefs going through this. You had one going out the door retiring, who went through the first one. And then the new chief coming in, he went through the second one, knowing that the first chief is going through it as well, even though he's retired. That was one of his, I'd say guys, it was one of his gals.
Yeah.
In fact, one of his gals he worked with for many, many years. So, yeah, you've got the effects that are not just with the active members of the department. It can go further than that. So having those services for retirees, for spouses, for non-sworn, the department you were speaking of in Aiken County, they were a mixed department, police and fire. So
right.
You had firefighters affected. You had the whole gambit. EMS affected, because obviously EMS and a fire service who does first responder type stuff, they work closely together. So they were affected. So
yeah,
it was a pretty unique situation, but you had stuff like it was meant to be ready to go. And that was one thing that I've noticed, that is not just you, but it's South Carolina, it's Georgia, it's North Carolina, it's Texas. And if they don't have it right there, it is nothing but a phone call away to call one of the other groups, other states, nonprofit, and say, hey, can you hook me up with this type of peer or this person? That's one thing I can't get over enough, that we have such great resources. So if you want to add to that, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's been such a blessing in South Carolina that the 4 state police agencies and the Office of the Adjutant General have come together to fund the staff of SC LEAP. And what that means is we have the luxury of thinking about it all the time. And my hope and prayer for the other states is that they will continue to develop through training and through funding and through the endorsement of the administrations of state and local police officers, that they will all continue to build on what they have already. And as I think about what happens to local officers and state police officers, I'm going to mention federal agents in a minute, but it's almost like a trajectory of care. So we are doing education at the front end. We're talking to chiefs and sheriffs and the commanders of the state police, and we're talking about the resources that are out there. This app was sent to every email address I had, and we'll be sending it out further to other officers across our state and across the country. But the creation of a trajectory of care that is not only the initial training and preparation for when bad things happen, but then the having in place your peer support team to apply the 10 different interventions of critical incident stress management. That's not the only game in town. That's not the only method of providing care to officers. It is the one that we use in South Carolina. There are other forms of peer support that are out there. We happen to find that one to fit our needs, sort of the high-speed operations, the law enforcement. But then, in addition to the initial peer support program, each state needs to have in place a culturally competent team of mental health professionals that understand law enforcement culture and fire culture and EMS and dispatcher culture, that understand particular modalities for helping officers who are stuck. Our preferred method of helping is often EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. We need to have resources where we can refer officers when they begin to use maladaptive coping mechanisms like drinking too much alcohol or prescription medicine to numb their pain, or when they need help with their marriage and family issues, or they've come back from the war zone and they've got post-deployment things going on, as well as facing the stress of law enforcement. So I think about that trajectory of care of the preparation, and then the incident happens, and then how you respond to it in the moment, but then how you respond to it over the course of the next year, 2 years, 10 years. That's so important. So important.
Yeah, I agree. That's one of the things I'm gonna tell you. I keep saying it over and over. so thankful to be involved in it. I'm so thankful for it to exist. And I know I'm not the only one saying it, because they're saying it all across all these states that are involved. You know, you were talking about how South Carolina's got it. You know, when we talked to Andy Carrier on the last show, Andy talked about Georgia's office, Public Safety Office of Peer Support, I believe is what it's called.
Right.
Same thing there. They've got a funded office that is focused on just that. So that's awesome. I hope to see more and more states doing it. I hope to see their office grow. I hope to see your office grow. That's the future of taking care of our first responders. It needs to keep growing. We need to keep taking care of it. We talk about technology and technology and technology. Of course, every agency has got to keep up with technology, but every agency also needs to keep up with the mental health of their employees. Yeah. So if I say one thing that hits somebody's head that's listening, that's not inside the peer support system, your mental health is first and foremost, because without that, the rest of it is going to fall apart. So.
Yes. Well, Sarge, I was thinking about that whole process of wellness. It's become such a hot issue of late. I had a department call me actually just this morning and was pleased to say, all right, we've got peer support for your person who's struggling. I've got a mental health point of contact in either direction from your city that we can send them to, that are endorsed by our program, culturally competent, trained in the things that they need to be trained in as licensed professional counselors. And also, by the way, here is an MD, here's a psychiatrist here in our state who's a former police officer, and he can get on the phone with that department. He can talk about medicine. He can talk about referral. So it's anyway, it doesn't happen over a short period of time. It's taken many years to get to that point, and we've got a lot of room to grow. We've got things yet to do in this area.
Yeah, I agree. Well, how about this? We do need to wrap it up. I want to give you a chance just to throw out some final thoughts. I mean, do you got to, I'd even say, hey, we're talking to the preacher, not a preacher, the preacher, the friend of the badge. Do you got maybe a favorite Bible verse, or maybe how about or even a funny joke or something? Do you got something that you could really bring this home to close this thing out?
Well, funny, there's a funny joke that we tell at many PCISs. Somebody's going to ultimately tell it at the end of a PCIS, and it's really based on the story of the Good Samaritan. It's the police officer who falls in a hole, and first the doctor comes by and looks down in the hole, and the guy says, "Hey, can you help me get out of here?" And the fella says, the doctor says, "Well, let me write you this prescription. I'll throw it down to you." That doesn't help him very much. Then the peers sort of knock on the preacher a little bit, and the preacher says, "Hey, let me write this prayer for you and throw it down in the hole." And that doesn't help him. That's nice, but it doesn't help him get out of the hole. And then a peer team member comes by and says, he jumps down in the hole with him, and he says, why did you jump in the hole? Now we're both down here. And he says, "Yeah, but I've been here before and I know the way out." So that's a great story. It's based on the story of the Good Samaritan, and I always like to hear it. So I hope that folks will look at our new app. There's a lot of information there. There's a brand new public safety chaplaincy training program there. There's something called clinical pastoral education that we're doing for the first time. It's a public safety focused clinical pastoral education, and it's online. Now there's part of it that you got to go and be face to face with officers with, but if you want an ACPE, that's a designation for a unit of clinical pastoral education, this is the program for you. So take a look at that app.
Oh, that's awesome. That's another, I think I saw the tab for it, but I didn't click on it because I wasn't the pastor, but I'm glad you said it. So, yeah, I've got to look into that app a lot more. Dr. Skidmore, Eric, friend, brother, I appreciate you. Thank you for being on the show. I know I'm going to be seeing you again here soon because we have phone calls with each other and we have deployments together. So, again, thank you, and I look forward to seeing you in the future, brother.
All right, Sarge, thanks so much for having me.
Thanks again for listening, friends. Let me tell you, we are greatly appreciative of your support of the SOS show, the Striped Onion show, and we are just as grateful for the friends we have inside our CISM network. Don't forget to share today's SOS call on your social media platforms. That is critical to getting the word out. And also make sure to leave some comments on whichever platform you listen to us on. We will respond to you. Visit our website at some point, thesosshow.com, and check it out. See what we have there. Sign up for the email notifications about shows and events we have coming up in the future. This is all about the first responders, about their support circles. So we want to make sure that it is impactful. And until next time, we hope everyone has a great day and a great week. Y'all stay safe out there, and God bless.